Okay, I guess we can just start now. Eric, are you ready?
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, thanks everybody for coming. We're here for the release of Eric's new book, Transcendental Mathematics, by Central Bank and Penultimate Press. It's a work that's pretty specific. It might be new to some people here, homotopy type theory. And this is sort of something that his last talk on this book at Central Banken sort of went over in depth, discussing the work Martin Low specifically in that one, but also it's in communication with Vladimir Vodovodsky. Um, and the sort of goal of this text, as sort of laid out in the beginning, is that there's these two philosophical traditions that seem irreconcilable: Husserl's phenomenology of consciousness and Badeau's mathematical ontology. There's some essence of this text that's incomplete, that's sort of going towards something, self-admittedly, but this sort of traversing and finding, teasing out limits of this approach is something that I found very compelling throughout the work. It's not like claiming it's this complete final work. Sort of reminded me of Eric's first treatise from 2023. Um, I wanted to start also, I guess, first with introducing everybody, and then we can sort of get into some of these more of these details. Eric is an applied category theorist and artist. He currently works at Kodamai, domain specific language and categorical semantics. His book that we're all here to celebrate is his second to the treatise that I just mentioned, which came out with Bauer Verlag in 2022. Reza Negarestani is a philosopher and writer. His work, Cyclonopedia, published by Re Press, and Intelligence and Spirit, Ergonomic and Sequence, are these foundational texts for me, and I know Eric as well. And it's sort of putting these things in communication now with this sort of Martin Loaf type theoretic judgment as knowledge act, moving it into a lot of really interesting directions. His text that he read at the last one was really amazing. If you weren't there. Cheyney Thompson is an artist. His work is shown at MoMA, the Whitney, Center Pompidou, SF MoMA, but is also deeply involved within his own work of with mathematics, an interest in category theory as well, and sort of these ideas in application to using models, rigorous procedures informed by category theory, certain ideas, morphisms, isomorphisms that come from these fields to produce visual work. Fabio Rojas is currently a professor of sociology and department chair at Indiana University. Before he was a working sociologist, he was studying mathematics at UC Berkeley and went through a graduate program there before pivoting into sociology explicitly. He uses as well in his work computational modeling, sort of this like economic sociology. I don't know if that, I don't mean to, that's not exactly what it is, but economic sociology, it's super interesting stuff, but using these ideas that are um, obviously grounded in these sort of like rational theory approaches in modeling sociological phenomenon and communities. I heard there was a recent one that Fabio is going to be putting out soon about, I'm not sure if that's loud, but about art and stuff, which I'm really excited about. And finally, Tim Pierson is a researcher and artist. He's currently a CTO at a stealth startup. This book, if you haven't gotten a copy, get a copy, but is partly dedicated to him. He's a super interesting researcher. We have talked a few times, but we also worked together for a little bit, which was very exciting. But okay, so I'm kind of wanting to get into the weeds, I guess, to start uh, here with a quote from Martin Loaf, which I thought, of course, would be appropriate. Um, that quote being, "What is it that logic is really about? It is about proof, not about truth in the first place. The things that we prove are what I call judgments. A judgment is an act of knowing, and a proof is what makes a judgment evident. That's the foundation, as I see it, of this text." Um, there's some other thinkers and writers. Fernando Zalamea, of course, is this one thinker based in South America who, again, also sort of carrying on this vein of like where analytic philosophy has departed and sort of maybe failed. And he creates, synthetic philosophy so we can carry on the actual work of mathematics in analytic philosophy. Um, I suppose my first fitting question would be for Eric. Um, and that question being, what to you, Eric, is seeing, or what does it mean to you to say that homotopy type theory unifies what these sort of irreconcilable fields, phenomenology and ontology, what does it mean to say that homotopy type theory does this or achieves this?
Oh, thanks, Connor. And oh yeah, and thanks everyone for coming participate and speaking, and thanks Connor for moderating. Um, so I think that that's a great quote that you read, and yeah, it relates to this notion of proof and evidence, and there being a witness for a certain judgment or proof of a judgment, and that kind of relates to this program in Martin Love type theory. First, I'll say that there's two kind of oh, someone's in the there's two
Yeah,
uh, uh, there's two types of two kind of branches that are being synthesized in homotopy type theory. There's the algebraic topology, and then there's the type theory. And it's really trying to encode these homotopic equivalences, uh, path deformations and homotopy. What from the title of the field, or the within the word of the field, and then type theory, which is an intuitionistic type theory, which is constructive and uh, is kind of formulated in terms of a series of rules, introduction, elimination rules, and uh, and formation rules, introduction, same, yeah. And I think of it as like, on the one hand, you have this kind of very local context in which you have a term inhabiting a type, and then you have that being, but then there being this element in which it kind of encodes like these like kind of topological geometric notions, where you can have, say, like the the covering space of um, the say S1, the circle, being encoded. If anyone's done the hot game, there's this Agda kind of game where you can try to um, relate these kind of uh, kind of deck transformations or movements between the fibers of the covering space down to literally like um, uh, the I think just like uh, the type theoretic core, or the computational core of the homotopy type theory. So I think on one hand there's this, kind of one hand there's the phenomenological, and the other hand there's the kind of maybe what I may call kind of a logic of the worlds, or a kind of like situational state of the situation, kind of a logic of kind of uh, um, eventual rupture and fidelity and whatnot, all these Baidoian terms to kind of change the kind of I mean Baido is originally, he's a super structuralist. That's what Emily Apter calls him, a professor at NYU, and it goes back to this whole, Rancierian, Baidoian, Althuserian school at the École Normale Supérieure, and there being this kind of premise that the ISA, or ideological state apparatus, has you know can be affected by the base, and the base can be affected by the ISA, and that's the kind of objective side, or objectivist side. I thought in the maybe that you could model these kind of things, but I'd be curious what other people think too.
As you were speaking, Eric, it occurred to me that a fun exercise. So, like when I think about kind of the motivation, your motivations for picking hot and sort of why hot is sort of in the air, it does present this promise of being able to kind of glue together localities, right? And does this basically because you have the univalence axiom um, in your kind of ambient theory, which means basically that you can transport anything that you can say about one thing to another thing, provided you can prove there's a path between those two things. Um, and in the book, you spend a bunch of time saying, ultimately concluding that Badiou is not really compatible with hot. But what would be a fun exercise would be to go into a hot equivalent system and build a type system for Badiou's ontology. Like build the whole thing in set theory, the way he describes it, and then prove an isomorphism between the type theory that you construct and what Badiou says. Because then you would get a proof, a delivery on the promise of what hot kind of offers. Just a thought.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, thanks for the idea, Tim. If I have some time, maybe I'll try to whip out a cubicle agda implementation, or
We could start a working group.
Yeah, Tim mentioned the univalence principle, Eric, and I think in the book you talk about like this crystallizing the duality between these two constructions, the phenomenological one and like objective structures in ontology. And I'm sort of wondering, does this like on what would the word be? Like, does this genealogy from like Husserl moving into Martin Loaf, this isn't like a retrospective construction. This is like in this lineage, correct? And I think that maybe this isn't this feels like a resolution to me in different parts of the text, in a way that felt super generative. It felt like I've been reading a couple things, per your recommendations in preparation for this, and it's just sort of it feels like such an expansive uh, framework, not just for explicitly mathematics, but something that's even beyond mathematics. I'm remembering Reza's talk at your at Central Bank, and talking about Martin Loaf type theory being this sort of framework to like move through, or type theory to move through like science fiction. It's like this incredible thing to like work through these things in this incredible way. And I was sort of, maybe this is a question more for everyone. Well, I guess it is a question for everyone. Um, how do we traverse this sort of, or how do we see through this sort of like local global traversing, this work at this sort of blur space, how do we see this as sort of resolved in a productive way by homotopy type theory? Like, do you see it as something that's it's fundamentally improving on the frameworks that are maybe present in, you know, I don't know, in art for art criticism or for, anything? Like, I guess what brought people to homotopy type
Oh,
theory or thinking about things through a category theory lens.
oh, I was just gonna say that originally, like the kind of the end of the book was just more or less about like governance and like AI stuff, AI governance, and so that was like the immediate thing that was like I was thinking about. But obviously, yeah, there's a whole kind of sci-fi vision that Reza was mentioning the last event we had from this same book, and then just about like kind of building like world making and building a new world, whatever, you know.
Yeah, right. I mean, also, I think maybe for audience that doesn't know, um, can you situate that when Max was reading this essay that you wrote, sort of like explaining some of what homotopy type theory is through analogy? Could you sort of make explicit the like isomorphism for people, or this as like just so there's like some common language that people might be understanding this through?
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah, so I was directly thinking, I mean, I tried to briefly bring this up at the last event, but um, there is a kind of more obscure notion of the term accelerationism that Benjamin Noyes coined, where he has writings in this Mill Plateau, Akim Serpansky, who passed away, rest in peace, um, uh, and uh, just framing, the post-industrial landscapes in the Midwest of, say Chicago house or Detroit techno, and this leading to this Afrofuturist vision, and then this draws on these kind of, other thinkers from CCRU who are like Kodwo Eshwan and the more Afrofuturist vision, and that basically, being a form of world making within the aesthetic itself, and I think of that's really crucial to at least my own hobbies and interests. I'm like really obsessed with underground resistance and Detroit electro and all this stuff, and yeah, I think it's a great example for manifesting this vision of like yeah, new world,
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was thinking of actually Cheyney, you did that talk with David Joslett, and you were, I think it's Panofsky maybe, or the like pseudomorphisms and some of that work, like early on. I was sort of wondering like the application or use, as you see it, of category theory generally to like think through like, criticism or thinking through history of like, diagrams like these. I was just curious your thinking using those as like tools. Like I ultimately think that some of what Eric's book is trying to do is make like tools for thinking through these sort of like diverse fields that initially doesn't seem reconcilable or something.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know if I can go through the talk, but what I think has come up already when or like one like long traversal does maybe go back to an older talk of David's Dada's diagrams from maybe 2004 and Brian Rotman's work back then. And I I think the how do I put it? The sort of no, like we talk about structure a lot of times, and especially like in an Althusserian way, as like a very real thing, like it's something that we're working to grasp, um to objectify in some way, but it's hard to know where structure presents itself or how. And in Rotman's case, I forget his formulation, but he he talked about it as a kind of embodied utopianism, where the drawing of the diagram sort of brings the diagram into the real in some way. But it's like the act of diagramming that does it. And I think that carried over for me in color theory and problems around it, where color on the one side was named phenomenon, and then on the other side was a set of potentially internally coherent structured relations. And there was a paper that meant a lot to me from around 15 years ago on color naming. I don't know who else could speak to this, but it's like there is something about the desire to gain access to structure on a level of description or as a tool that always carries with it, I think, this local global problem, that it's then something that'll be superimposed or overwritten onto the world. And I think there's been something around category theory for me that's sort of at least like works against my own um intuitions about that given a structure, given an understanding of a structure, like there needs to be something that sort of keeps us grounded in the local instantiation of that structure. Like once we have it, it's not um yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is also like my earlier interest in perspectival space as a kind of diagramming of a world that then produces a world and produces subjects and produces localities, but all within a kind of uh, globalizing framework. It sort of becomes a totality, and once it becomes a totality, you can't step outside of it, you know. Um, Yeah, that's what I have to say for now on some of these problems. But with the pseudomorphism, I guess back to that, I think the suspicion about resemblance and like a desire around a kind of structural thinking that resemblance isn't reliable. I mean, that's just like a skepticism, I guess.
Yeah, and I think Eric, you go into this in the text, right? With like just ordinals, or these sort of things are not exact, but they have some exactitude is not the same. I mean, this approach feels something that's like throughout the text. I'm sort of also wondering if there's specific passages of maybe Martin Loaf that that like brought you, Eric, to like writing this text and sort of bringing it through to, like, as you said at the end, sort of like AI governance, like into
Um,
like an application, or like you were like looking at structures, you're seeing like a problem, and then you're like this
yeah,
void.
I think I was largely inspired by Reza's work on, you know, Reza his work on in intelligence and spirit, in terms of centering it in terms of AI. Uh, um, when and then it kind of like I mean, personally, like I just uh finished my degree in applied mathematics, this master's program last year. So I started working kind of in like hands-on with category theory and type theory since about July last year. But before that, I was maybe more interested in it philosophically. And I think that perspective where it's tied to um, questions of AI came originally from being influenced by Reza's work, but today now it's like at Kodamai we're I can't really say what we're doing, but um, we're interested in the kind of synthesizing the connectionist to with the symbolic, the neurosymbolic approach, and using type theory and category theory. There's a recent white paper that came out yesterday that for our launch um, describing things.
Cool. I guess this would be for everyone, and it's sort of going off this like moving into sheaf theory, but sort of going off of what this conclusion is at the end of the text is like um, in Zalamea, which seems like a big interlocutor in both of these texts, in this one, Dub Langland's, and then in your T's. Um, I was thinking of Zalamea as moving through like the sheaf is the right philosophical image for how knowledge works, and um, and there's like the local sections, there's compatibility on some of these overlaps on a sheaf, but there's no like global guarantee. And I was sort of wondering is like maybe this like failure of like a global guarantee or a failure of global sections. Is there a place to move from there? Like, is this like a possible for some sort of like liberatory turn? It seems like there is. I was just wondering everyone's thoughts on this. Fabio?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point because for me, that was the most interesting part of the text. As a sociologist, we think about culture a lot, and we often ask questions like, is there a global culture? Is there a culture that's international? If so, where does it come from? If not, why does it not work? And some of the answers to those questions are frankly kind of depressing. So, for example, one answer says that, very powerful institutions like Western scientific institutions or economic institutions spread their blueprint across the world. There's a whole theory of that. But if you take Eric's text and you take it really seriously, and there's a lot to think about in terms of where the variance in culture comes from, to use a mathematical term, there's an obstruction, so to say. Like you may think there's something global covering the whole space, but it doesn't work out that way. There's something in the way, there's a mismatch. Recalling my complex analysis course from like 1993, there was a discussion of monodromy, going around the circle and coming up to the wrong place. But in sociology, this makes a lot of sense because the way modern sociologists understand culture, and Eric was talking about local cultures of resistance, is that culture always comes through interaction. There's no such thing as a global culture that makes you do anything. In fact, all we do is we get recipes and toolkits, and then we deploy them in face-to-face interactions like what we're doing now. But if you do it in location A, that's not the same as location B. In language of sheaves and pre-sheaves, in culture, you could always build a pre-sheaf. That's pretty straightforward. You could always build a sheaf, but the global sections are where the action happens. And it's interesting then the world of hard STEM style science, the lack of a global section is kind of depressing, right? That your function's not continuous, there's a singularity, like something's not right. But maybe from a sociological perspective, that's actually good. That's where the variance comes from. And if you really take Eric's approach of using category theory and sheaf theory as a way of modeling or thinking about culture, it starts pointing you to questions of like, where does the meaning come from? So, like the mismatch of the fibers might be a place where meaning comes from. We have to think about that to create some difference. Another section of the text I thought that was interesting. It may sound trivial, but the discussion of the power, Cantor's theorem about the power set always having greater cardinality than the original set. And I always thought that was like kind of a basic undergraduate logic kind of a thing. But in retrospect, I realized, oh my God, that's where a lot of meaning happens. Like you lay out a situation and but it's the way you put them together that adds more meaning, that expands the space of what you can think about. So, in response to Connor's query about these issues, I think this is really fun for pe people who are into culture like me, anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists, because this starts answering questions like, why don't we all have the same culture? Like, why isn't it all uniform all the time? And this is one way of thinking about it, but it's not, but it's a disciplined way of thinking about it, because otherwise you get to some positions where everything is incommensurable. Like I have my local culture and it doesn't match up with another culture. It kind of reminds me of Evelyn Kenor-Katina's book on epistemic cultures. You know, she argues there's no such thing as science. They're just local lab cultures, right? You learn your science in one discipline or laboratory, and nothing matches up. There's multiple sciences. But if you believe Eric's description of Sheaves, like, well, maybe there's not one smoothly constructed science, but there's local constructions, and you could ask why they don't match up, and that's really interesting. So anyway, that's a great question, Connor. Thanks for raising it.
Yeah, thanks for your answer. Yeah, I mean, I think like moving into sociology or moving into like I like like the theoretical game theory back end on some of Eric's interests. Like I love talking about those topics, but yeah, like this sort of like even yeah, culture broadly. I know that Kluge just died, Alexander Kluge, interesting writer, filmmaker. And I often go to him for like just thinking this through a novel, but I think that similarly, like yeah, I mean, this is feels very similar to me. But it's more rigorous. It provides like this set to like think about these problems with a huge swath of tools for particular instances in diagnosing these local things as relate to some sort of maybe global thing. Yeah. Did anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I maybe have a question.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for the interesting input because I come more from like math sheaf theory, so I find this very interesting that like all you guys have different approaches what sheaves could be and stuff. So I was curious whether you ever thought about yeah, like derived sheaf theory and stuff like that, or even like connections coming from Donaldson Thomas theory, where you have like topological spaces, and then the sheaf theory gives you way of defining like not only smooth structures on spaces, but like virtually smooth structures. This like hidden smoothness phenomenon, which I think from a philosophical point of view is also very interesting. Because it's yeah, it's a generalization of how we like see spaces. And like sheaf theory and derived sheaf theory is a very natural framework where you can frame these things. So I was wondering whether people have thought about that as well already. So like yeah, like derived categories and stuff like that. Like for of sheaves, I mean.
Anyone want to field one? Eric, are you interested
Oh,
in
yeah, I've worked through a little bit of like Rotman's homological algebra and working with derived functors, and I haven't yeah, I think that
Yeah, that
it's a
book is
good
very dry. I don't recommend it. Yeah.
oh uh um and then yeah, I think what am I trying to say? Yeah, I think the context that I'm mostly working on, at least as an applied category theorist, is like working with like say sheaf neural networks or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
kind of applied topology, you know, in the style of Robert Grist, and working with these you know Laplacians and sheaf
All right, yeah.
diffusion, and it's so it isn't super algebraic or categorical in that sense. And I think, but there is interesting work I think being done by the Chinese company working on AI, led by Olivia Caramello and Laurent Laforgue and
Oh yeah,
Daniel
that guy now.
Benekin, and then Belfiore, Jean-Claude Belfiore, where it's this topos and stacks of deep neural networks. But that, I think that it's such a high price to pay to be invested in that approach that it kind of scares me a little bit.
I get that. I think there are a
Yeah.
couple of like nice like philosophical approaches that I think are interesting and like easy to understand. The idea that in derived categories, if you have like a complicated sheaf that you don't want to study, you can kind of resolve it. And then you have a complex, many sheaves. Each of them are very simple, but you don't have that single object anymore. But now you have to deal with that complex of sheaves. And in the right framework, that resolution of that complicated sheaf by those many simple sheaves is like quasi-isomorphism. So they're like the same object. And that is because they carry like the same cohomology, and because people are talking about, the global to local to global obstructions, like that derived category and that like resolution of sheaves is like the right framework to also phrase everything in terms of like local to global obstructions and stuff like that. So this is why I think it's super interesting. But yeah, I don't think you need to use neural networks and stuff like that. I think there are a couple of nice blog posts on Stack Exchange where they explain to you how derived categories work. And I think even with very simple examples, even vector spaces, they tell you like a lot why that's very interesting. So it could be interesting for you as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I did recently pick up the I think it's Pierre Sharp.
Yeah, Sheaves are Manifold, that book.
Yeah. No, the categories in sheaves one.
Yeah.
The I think he has two.
Yeah, he has Sheaves are Manifold, and then I think he wrote a second one. Yeah.
Yeah. The other one, and I think that gets into the kind of derived categories and localization and I have a little bit of I have a paper from last year that I was using some of this I would call it maybe more general framework with just quivers and Grothendieck topologies that I can send you. But if you
that's nice.
If you send me your email,
I will. Oh yeah.
I could. I'd love to chat.
Yeah, I mean, if you do Grothendieck topologies and stuff, that's already that's even more difficult approach, because then your topology is more difficult. But I think that derived category stuff you can just frame with like basically take any complex nice space you want to have, and then you study like sheaves on it, start with vector bundles, and then you end up with different sheaves that are more complicated. But then since your base space is nice, you can replace this complicated sheaf with like a complex of simple sheaves. And then that's a nice way to do. And then that's also a nice approach how to study this like virtual smoothness, where you go away from those like smooth spaces and go to virtually smooth spaces that have this n-rate of properties, where those spaces have those kind of points inside that you can count. And then you have those moduli space problems, which I think from a philosophical point of view are like super interesting to study. And you don't need all of that complicated homological algebra theory. I mean, a little bit, but the good books on sheaf theory, they have like an appendix on homological algebra, but everything in there is wrong. So based on that, you can see that people don't really need it. So it's actually not too difficult. But yeah, I'll definitely send you an email.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, the case that I was working on this paper with Fernando Tomé and algebraist here in Chicago was just dealing with the path category of quivers and trying to form a Grothendieck topology on the path category for some interesting kind of sheafifying for some kind of combinatorial or quote unquote combinatorial structure of a multigraph quiver multigraph, where you have, say, source, target, and like nodes and paths, where you can have multiple edges or multiple maps, as many maps really as you want in a quiver, or loops, But the case we were dealing with was an acyclic, the acyclic case.
Yeah, so in this quiver business, there's also this so in this Donaldson Thomas theory business, there's like also this quiver theory side, which I think in that case probably is very close to what you were doing. Yeah, so the representation theory of quivers and stuff. So I think that's
exactly.
also interesting. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It was looking at the relationship between, say, you have with a pre-sheep, you have a functor from C-op to whatever that you're interested in.
The U
say,
group usually,
yeah, and this the category theorists usually use set, but in this case we were using vect. And in the applied topology world, a nice kind of pre-sheaf or sheaf is where you have pre-sheaves or sheaves of vector spaces, and that kind of has a nice relationship to representations, because those are are already vector spaces, or have this are into vector spaces, whatever.
Yeah, I think most mathematicians then in the end they care about like functors that go from some category to basically modules, like commutative modules, and then you have all that machinery of commutative algebra you can throw onto your sheaves, which are then just locally given by some module, and globally they're something else. And then you have like coherent sheaves, quasi-coherent sheaves, which people usually do then.
Yeah, I think Fabio knows a ton about this stuff, because he was studying algebraic geometry at UC Berkeley with that, because that's generally the case where, from what I understand, you have like what's called a nice category is like an abelian category, or
exactly, that's an abelian category.
Yeah.
Right, because it has kernels and co-kernels and all these kind of things, so it's an abelian category. Yeah, it's true.
But I don't think we've heard from Reza. If you have any thoughts, or if you wanted to speak.
Sure. Magnificent comments. So I thought that we are going to actually present papers on your book. Hence, I wrote one.
Oh, well, if you want to read something,
I can just read 10 minutes of it. One of the things that I'm very interested. So last time that we talked about your work, I mostly focused on Kant, and Per Martin Loaf, which, of course, that is kind of, you need to do that as a philosopher to kind of lay the groundwork. But it was really interesting for me that now you are bringing Husserl into the fold, and why Husserl is actually more fundamental in this topic about hot than Kant. This is, of course, many people might anticipate that I'm going to talk about Husserlian types, which that's exactly what I'm going to do. But why Husserlian types are unlike actually types in Per Martin Loaf's philosophy, but nevertheless they converge upon fundamental questions, which is the question of identity and sameness, which is always at the background. We don't know exactly what it might be, right? So if you allow me, I will read for 10 minutes and then, Oh, by the way, Fabio, magnificent comment. What you said reminded me of Alexander Bogdanov's project, if you're familiar with his work. So Alexander Bogdanov essentially was a doctor, an engineer, and a Bolshevik revolutionary, and an artist. He was an interlocutor of none other than Lenin and Maxim Gorky. Later, he became completely, disillusioned by Lenin's ideology, and he was excommunicated. So he has this sort of project about this idea that, the idea of the local global at the level of sociology, at the level of enculturation, is a messy thing, precisely because we are not just simply dealing with the design space, we are dealing also with metabolism when we are building local interfaces. I highly recommend, of course, his canonical book, Technology, on the science of building or organization.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I think that's a really great comment. I love the idea of metabolism. And while you read your paper, I'm going to just put that in the comment section. So if other people want to check out that book, they'd have the name of the book in the comments. But yeah, this whole idea that culture is messy. Um, Often we try to make it not messy. And uh, what's really compelling about Eric's book is that his approach of using categories and sheaves to talk about these processes, I think, strikes a nice balance between a formalism most people could understand. Um, if you're not a mathematician, you could probably pick up the basic wording of category theory quickly. It's been 30 years since I was first introduced to categories at a classroom at UC Berkeley. I survived, and 30 years later, even with that basic introduction, I can follow a lot of discussion. But also at the same time, it's rich enough to capture the complexity of things. So Simon, for example, was talking about, derived sheaves, the idea of taking complicated spaces and breaking them down to like a bundle of different things. I can imagine a formalism that a sociologist or psychologist could use where you take something like language or a novel or something, and it could be represented in category theoretic terms, and then it would be messy in some ways, or complicated, and then you would have to, you know, I don't want to say the D word of deconstruct because that means a very specific thing, but maybe disassemble, pull apart in some way, and create a series of objects that you could study using this language. So thank you, Reza. And I think that's the messiness that is implicit in all this text that Eric wrote. The book is short, but it actually has a lot of richness to it if you then follow his conclusions. So I will look that up and put that in the comments of Bogdanov's book for people to follow up on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Magnificent. So, very quickly, the
Hey,
problem.
Reza,
Sorry.
before you start, I just wanted to add one thing and maybe loop Tim in because
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
I
By the
like
way,
the
hello, Cheyney.
hi Reza, nice to see you.
Absolutely love
Um,
you.
but when Fabio was talking, I was reminded of this set of Claude Levi-Strauss talks that I came across a couple years ago for the UNESCO Foundation, and there was one in 1971. It was series, I think 1970, sometime in the 50s, 1971. I'm going to put this in the chat too. But this quote from it came to mind in his 1971 intervention, which was dealing with the problem of globalization at the time and UNESCO's project for a kind of universal education. But in his talk, he said the right of every culture to remain deaf to the values of the other, a kind of stubbornness and single-mindedness as a condition for cultural creativity. This clashed with the program. And with that, Reza, before you start, Tim, I know structuralism for you is also like makes its way back to Levi Strauss and your earlier time in reading. But I was just wondering if like I think this when Fabio introduced it like meaning or the study of culture, and you've brought up a number of times, Tim, like Levi Strauss's relationship to group theory. And so maybe before Reza goes, just like if you could comment on this sort of through line. I don't even want to call it the humanities because there's this kind of scientific, like with Bogdanov or Ernst Mach, or like core that runs through 20th century humanities.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of think that like what got called structuralism in the humanities is kind of wants to be what the sort of, I don't know, category theory type theory turn that we're seeing now should have been in a lot of ways. So like when, Levi-Strauss receives the kind of critique, the Derridean critique of of logocentrism against the sort of primacy of structure that he puts forward in these systems, what you sort of have is a limit to the possibilities of like a categorification of signifiers of languages. So if you have on the one hand like kind of Levi-Straussian um, invariants that are formal invariants that you can sort of specify within a formal language. And like Levi-Strauss doesn't use a real formal language, but it does kind of approach like an algebraic sort of invariant like presentation. You then run into the problem of the sort of dissemblance of what those signifiers do as soon as you put them back into natural language. And this parallels the problem that you have, of course, of going between a local sort of space that you're interested in and trying to get into some global order that might not exist. So, like the kind of the turn to hot and the sort of hope to like these kind of dialectical maneuvers between local and global, where you don't actually have a global orientation or you don't have a totality that holds, is kind of an antidote, I think, to the impasses that we saw during the kind of culture wars of the 80s and 90s to a certain extent, because you don't get around the problems, right? Like Fabio has talked about here, you run into the same kind of messiness of synthesizing these things. If you want to go to Kant and you want to talk about the sort of the historical kind of corruption of the empirical in these formalisms, that's fine. You can't get around that. You still have to sort of do the labor of making the translation between whatever kind of local. I mean, like a lot of Kant scholars also talk about this, of the kind of what's important is that you go through the locally established invariants that make something admissible. It's not whether or not the kind of signifying material itself can find a place kind of within the global order. So with respect to Levi-Strauss and this problem of it's the right of every culture to remain silent, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that this is like the cool kind of promise of being able to approach these problems. Like, UNESCO's not asking anybody to do this anymore, but if they did, you could maybe like build some categorical machinery and then go out and say like, well, this will be where the functor is forgetful, right? Like this is going to be the place where you're not going to preserve all of the information, and that could be like a site of refusal, or it could be a site of resistance, or some sort of other sort of subversion. But like the kind of formalism of the invariants, the structural language that underpins them, those things still kind of hold, and like they do sort of hold a promise to kind of revisit a lot of those impasses that more or less got thrown out and then taken up under like a type of relativism or yeah, other things. Anyway, that was a long-winded response, but
Yeah, that was great. That was dope.
thank you.
Go, Reza.
So the problem, why must Husserl? So basically, this was the title of the whole thing, but I'm going to just skip through the text. Type, constitution, and identity. Husserl, Kant, Martin Loef, and Hott. So the problem, why Husserl must mediate here, right? Many attempts to relate transcendental philosophy to homotopy type theory move too quickly from Kant to formalism. The usual claim is that Kant grounds mathematics in construction, while type theory makes construction central to proof, existence, and objecthood. By itself, however, that remains only analogical at best. It risks making Hot look like a late vindication of pure intuition, when the deeper issue is the constitution of objectivity, identity, and admissible evidence. This is where Husserl then becomes indispensable. A stronger root begins elsewhere. Kant isolates the condition under which judgments can count as objectively valid. Husserl, however, asks how an object is already being prefigured, anticipated, or presentified in his jargon, and unified before predicative judgment fully arrives. Martin Love then lays out the explicit forms of judgment through which constructive theory determines what counts as an object, as evidence, and as truth. Homotopy type theory then radicalizes the problem by transforming the grammar of identity itself, the path from Kant to Hot, as outlined by Martin Loaf in Analytic and Synthetic Judgments in Type Theory, 1994, should therefore pass through Husserl's analysis of type, a perception and transcendental subjectivity. When we are talking about anticipation here, we don't mean it something like Robert Rosen's anticipatory systems. We are talking about Husserl's type is not a predictive model for regulation, but a pre-predicative, a structure of familiarity through which something shows up in advance as this sort of thing across changing appearances, right? This shift matters because the philosophical issue in homotopy type theory is not only that mathematical objects are constructed, it is also that sameness is no longer a mute background condition. Identity then becomes evidence-bearing, stratified, and transportable. If Kant gives us the problem of synthesis and Husserl gives us the phenomenology of how something is held together as one object across variations, then homotopy type theory offers a formal regime in which those unity conditions are rewritten inside the theory itself. 2. Kant's lasting insight, construction, schema, and objectivity, but that's also the shortcoming of Kant here. Kant's enduring insight is not that mathematics depends on private mental imagery, it is that mathematical objectivity is secured by rule-governed construction. And mathematical judgment does not merely unpack the concept, it extends condition under constraints that are not empirical. Construction is therefore the warrant of necessity. The transcendental question is accordingly not what mathematical objects secretly are, but what must be presupposed for judgments about them to have objective purport at all. This is why the doctrine of schematism in Kant remains crucial. Kant's schema or schemata is not an image, but a rule for giving a concept its sensible use. It mediates between concept and intuition by prescribing how something can be exhibited as an object in the first place. At this level, Kant already moves beyond a mere classificatory account of cognition, and then objectivity now depends on synthesis, and synthesis depends on rules that guide what belongs together, what can count as one and the same, and what can be legitimately subsumed under a concept. Yet Kant leaves one difficulty unresolved. The schema functions, but its genesis remains obscure as a secret. Hence that notorious sentence that Kant talks about a schema. That these are secrets of the soul. We don't know what it is, but most probably AI is now becoming a schematic discipline. He can say that it is a rule of imagination, even a necessary one, but the empirical and predicative side of this guiding function remains under-described. How does an object come to be anticipated as this sort of thing rather than that one? How are its lawful continuations tacitly held in advance? It is precisely here that then Husserl becomes fundamentally decisive. 3. Husserl's type, pre-predicative guidance and the constitution of the object. In Husserl's later genetic phenomenology, the concept of type does much of the work that Kant assigns to a schema, but within a more explicit analysis of perception. The type is not a discursive concept hovering above experience. It is a pre-predicative guide for a perception. It tells us, before explicit judgment, what belongs to an object, what can be expected of it, how its hidden sides may continue, and how disparate, different sensible moments can be taken together as one unity. What matters methodologically is that Husserl does not stop at a static inventory of such structures. He asks how they become operative, sedimented, and normatively available within the horizon of intentional life. So in his essay, Husserl's Type and Kant's Schemata, Systematic Reasons for Their Correlation or Identity, Dieter Lohmar, comparison brings this issue into focus. The Husserlian type functions as an intentional anticipation or an anticipatory grasp. We apprehend the unfamiliar in the mode of the familiar. What is given does not arrive as an inert heap of qualities. It arrives already under horizons of possible completion, correction, and continuation. For example, his famous example, a seen flower is not merely a color patch next to a stem-shaped line. It is held together under a typified expectation of what counts as blossom, stem, leaf, scent, and growth. Likewise, a person seated behind a table is not assembled from isolated sensory fragments only after the fact. The type guides the synthetic unity through which these fragments are taken as always belonging together. The advantage now over Kant is not that Husserl abandons transcendental question, it is that he gives a more exact account of the operative middle region between bare sensation and explicit concept. The type remains general, yet flexible enough to tolerate variation, perspective, and alteration. It is not a rigid image, but a rule-like horizon, adjustable to changing modes of givenness. This also opens genetic question. Not only what structures make objectivity possible, but how horizons of anticipation, familiarity, and fulfillment are formed over time for genetic, a priori, judgment, and the synthetic frontier. By genetic, Husserl means the genesis of objectivity through temporal synthesis, sedimentation, habit, anticipation, and fulfillment. This shift also transforms the meaning of the a priori. For Kant, the a priori is prior to and independent of experience. For Husserl, however, especially in the genetic analysis, structures that arise through experiential sedimentation can nonetheless become constitutive for subsequent experience. This is not an instance of psychologism. It shows how lawful forms of anticipation, fulfillment, and correction belong to the architecture of consciousness, even when their content is historically formed. The type is therefore empirical in genesis without being merely empirical in function. It becomes transcendental by governing the possibility of object constitution. Once this shift is in view, Martin Loeff's paper can be reread more sharply. He describes type theory by exhibiting the forms of judgment it employs. Typing judgments and definitional identities determine what counts as an object of discourse and what counts as the same object by rule. Existence and truth, by contrast, are synthetic in that they require a witness, a construction, a proof, where basically per Martin Loaf, if you have found his YouTube lecture, he goes on and on about why is that in logic, we are talking about proof. Uh, and then he notices that all the Arabic translation of Aristotle, they have used the word hukm, judgment and proof. The result is an explicit grammar of objective validity in which analytic decidability and synthetic production are internally differentiated. This is already Kantian in method, heard through Husserl. It is also a theory of how a domain of object is constituted through admissible forms of evidence. The word type now appears in two registers, phenomenological and formal. These are not the same concept, yet they converge on a common question. What makes something available as an object under determinate conditions of admissibility, recognition, and use? Husserl's type is a predicative guide of a perception. Martin Loeff's type is the explicit form under which an object can be judged, exhibited, and checked. The transition from to the other is not identity, but it is more than a pun. It marks a historical displacement in how constitutive norms are now being articulated. And homotopy type theory enters precisely where this constitutive question becomes most interesting. In a standard Martin Loef type theory, there is already a distinction between a definitional equality, which belongs to the analytic core, and propositional equality, whose inhabitants are pieces of evidence. So homotopy type theory intensifies the latter by interpreting identity proofs homotopically. Equality is no longer a bare yes or no relation. It becomes a structural space of paths with higher identifications relating identifications themselves. Identity is not presupposed as a silent background unity. It becomes itself an articulated object of construction. A Husserlian reading helps here more than a direct appeal to Kantian pure intuition. Husserl's account of objecthood is inseparable from the manifold possible appearances through which one and the same object is held together. The object is constituted across adumbrations, anticipations, retentions, and fulfillments. The type regulates these continuities, while the surrounding horizon supplies the background of possible completion and correction. Homotopy type theory offers no phenomenology of perception, but it does provide a formal analog of it. One and the same object is inseparable from the space of admissible identifications through which it can be tracked, compared, and transported. This analogy must be stated, however, carefully. A path in homotopy type theory is not visual profile, and a higher path is not a phenomenological horizon. But Husserl lets us say something more precise than the slogan that homotopy type theory is simply the logic of a space. What homotopy type theory formalizes is a regime in which identity is accessible only through a structured evidence and in which objectivity depends on lawful transfer across variation. In that respect, Husserl's analysis of typified unity and manifold givenness illuminates the philosophical stake of identity types better than a literal appeal to Kantian intuition. So I can actually send the full paper to anyone who wants, but I wanted to just read this part at least.
Oh, I'll send you an email, Reza. If you could send me the paper, that'd be great.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah, that was Thank you, Reza, for reading that. Man, okay, so does anybody, I don't know, I'm not sure how long we can go. It's been about an hour. We can keep talking or we can do questions. What are you feeling, Eric?
Maybe, yeah, did anyone have any comments? I was thinking when you were reading that, Reza, about this that book that came out on Cambridge University Press, New Spaces in Mathematics by Mathieu Annel and Gabriel Catran, specifically the essay by um, Michael Schulman, the higher category theorist. Oh, sorry, someone's at the door. Yeah,
Eric,
oh, I'm back. Um, yeah, I was thinking there's a part in there. I have the book here.
When did it come?
Oh, I think you may have cited it too. You know, by Michael Schulman, he's a higher category
Of course,
theorist.
I know. Yes, I know him. Yes.
It made me think of this. Gabriel Catran edited this book that came out on Cambridge, the New Spaces in Math, New Spaces in Physics, and
Yes, yes.
he talks
I think
about
I know which essay you are talking about.
he
Yes.
talks about synthetic spaces like synthesis within homotopy type theory um, from a philosophical perspective. I mean, it's pretty dry, but um, and but yeah, I really enjoyed what you said about kind of unifying these variations, um, up to path deformation within, say the term of a type or the type, whatever.
Yes, yes.
I
Yes.
mean, Reza, as you were talking, something occurred to me as you were sort of going over the kind of witness propositions of constructive type theory. And it's true that, like, I mean, in the hot book, they explicitly say that, like, when you are constructing a proof, what you're doing is constructing the universe of possible witnesses to the inhabitants of the type, which is like a really kind of elegant way of describing what a proof is, right? So, like, if math is effectively the study of the things that are invariant under rewriting, so you've got rewriting systems that are more or less mechanizable. That was what Vavassori was interested in when he developed the whole program, was that these things could be mechanized by a computer and then people could communicate about them and with them sort of faster and easier because they were all the interfaces were already sort of given there. So if the mathematics sort of side of this is a kind of mechanized witness, it still invokes like the other, the big specter of the other. And when I think about the function of a witness, like in psychoanalysis, for example, the analyst plays the function of witness in a clinical setting. But the witness that they provide isn't the other the way that it is in mathematics. It's properly the lack in the other, right? It's the sort of the part that the other doesn't quite embody. But in instantiating that lack, what you do get is something like I mean, there's not really a mathematical analogy to it, but you do get a type of orientation. You get coordinates within the other, which in terms of psychoanalysis is like the body of words for Lacan. So if you think about like these two modes of witnesses, what is a witness under like a proof in hot witness? It's a kind of it's like it's a it's a witness that has been purified of the signifier, right? It's completely mechanized. It can witness the rewriting and it can see what happens. and it does not need and does you generally in science you don't want any subjective experience. Like it doesn't matter. Like if you name your variables something hysterical, it's not going to be a paper that's going to be accepted. They've got to be metasyntactic variables. They can't have any signification attached to them. And in the book, Eric goes into this kind of long dialogue with Derrida's kind of challenges to these, well, to like the supposed kind of formal completeness of natural language through these formal systems. And I think that like, you could kind of phrase the tension between like, what we're all here doing, talking about hot kind of presently, and what you sort of do in the formal language of hot as a tension between those two witnesses, right? You've got the mechanized sort of witness of a subject that is purified from the signifier, of course, doesn't exist, but is mostly just an algorithm. And then you've got people who are caught in words here, who are then trying to kind of describe or ascribe some meaning to the body of words that you have to deal with every day.
Tim, to be honest with you, I think that this is one of the greatest comments I've ever received.
Well,
And then
thank you.
I was here. I'm going to read this so you see that it is
Okay.
absolutely there is something here. So you know that Husserl was a student of Brentano,
Hmm. Yeah.
and Brentano was a teacher of both Husserl and Freud.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So you see
Amazing.
that there is something going on here
For
that
sure.
is unbelievable. So
For
this is
sure.
this section, transcendental subjectivity and the consciousness of absent. Usually Husserl doesn't believe this as the other. Other is more Levinasian, later phenomenology
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
way of French. But really the idea of the absent, but absent not as a lack, right? As not as a lack. It's just like, for example, when we fantasize about something, a pink elephant hovering before me. Yeah. We don't have direct perceptual thing, and it's not a delusion or an illusory image, a la Plato, but nevertheless something. So there is this essay highly suggested too. It's by Rodolphe Bernet. It's called Unconscious Consciousness in Husserl and Freud.
Hmm.
And he opens a further path by showing that Husserl's analysis of fantasy, memory, and presentification reveal a consciousness that does not coincide with what is presently given. By presentification, Husserl simply means the intentional making present of what is absent without reducing it to immediate perceptual presence. Consciousness can bring the non-present to appearance without reducing it to present perception. Reproductive inner time consciousness allows relation to what is absent, foreign, even alien, not fully self coincident. The subject is therefore not a transparent point of presence, but internally articulated by retention, reproduction, and the process of presentification. This matters for a transcendental reading of constructive mathematics because it loosens the identification of evidence with immediate givenness. Then Husserl's point is not that anything goes in the absence of perception. The absent or the alien, the foreign, can appear only under specific modes of intentional articulation. Evidence can therefore be mediated through becoming arbitrary. Without becoming arbitrary, one may say cautiously that Husserl gives a richer account of constructive presence than all of these. What is validly given need not be primitively present, but must be reproducibly and lawfully accessible within a field of operations, which is the computer itself, right? Berners' claim is that the unconscious is not simply an amputated consciousness, but another self-consciousness matters here because it shows that transcendental subjectivity includes difference as a condition of manifestation.
Cool.
It was magnificent comment. I'm superb
But
that
I'm
you came up with
flat,
that.
very flattering. Thank you. I like it. It is a really interesting nexus for sure. Um, because again, like these are, I mean, we're talking about possible ways to kind of are tools with which you could approach something like unification, but not really. Because, oh, on that note, like, in Lacan, at the end, there is never a one, but there is this phrase that he gives, Yadlun. There is of the one, Iliad Dalun, in the end. And
Yes,
so
yes,
there's like that, it feels like kind of within, yeah, I don't know, within this axis that somehow is evoked. Yeah, but interesting. Thank you.
absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't help but thinking, Reza, this back and forth, you and Tim and Reza, like, great. I'm so glad okay, this came out. It had me thinking a lot about like optimal transport or just like active inference generally. Like, what is it doing? And it kind of got me to think like, isn't like, active inference, it's trying to sort of like in these terms of like the foreign or whatever, it's trying to like eliminate that, right? Like it's trying to reduce free energy,
Yeah.
right? But then
Yeah.
optimal flow, statistical mechanics, or whatever, it's like kind of where I'm coming from. Like it's just seeing it as a distribution as it is, and it's just, but it's like memoryless in that
Yeah. I
context.
mean,
Like,
so, there's a really good lecture by John Baez from maybe 10 years ago that I think about a lot, where the talk is like on it's kind of on evolution and information theory. It's not really, I mean, I feel like it's on something like really kind of dry nominally, but he says he gives a information theoretic presentation of evolution in terms of KL divergence. And it is precisely what
yes,
you're talking about right here. Like
yeah, yeah,
it is the minimization of surprise, and this somehow manages to kind of explain the structuration of all of these sorts of systems. Um, yeah, I mean, it's like it's worth looking at. It's like not it does it doesn't generalize everything, but it is really interesting because it comes down to like a question of like entropy is the thing which like engenders more structure. Like that's what gets you forward, right? Like it's
right.
the progressive encoding of invariance, which is also, what we're here talking about.
Yeah, there's this great paper, like this is kind of the field that I like, work in now,
Yeah,
more
yeah.
so. And there's this great paper from this guy at Stanford, Grant Rotzkoff. He's like a math
Mm,
person that studied complexity science, but he's a chemist. And
mm.
he just has this great paper on optimal flow and sort of using Monte Carlo samplers to solve this problem. And it was in the National Proceedings of Science, and it's a very novel approach that they gave, but I couldn't handle it. It was like it's like one of my favorite
Mm.
papers I've read in a long time. But as you're all saying this, it's like, yeah, this is all connected in this strange way. It's making me feel like, reading the Langland's program stuff where I'm like, oh my God, like, it's all happening. But yeah, man, okay. I don't want to take up too much air here. Is anybody else is stoked on this? Is that or any questions in the room? Federico? I realize we just haven't, maybe I don't even know. Maybe not. Um, Anyone here in the Zoom?
Well, I was going to say something related to what you were saying, Connor, just about active inference, because I work under this um, category theorist who's also a neuroscientist who was one of the first to give a compositional account of the mathematical brain. I think that's the title of his dissertation. using in his dissertation at Oxford, he uses Spivak's work to specifically the paraconstruction in category theory, and for these kind of Bayesian lenses and like agents that can have make inferences given some posterior priors, or whatever, and I just think that category theory seems like the natural way to express this kind of invariance, that happens in, say, statistical mechanics. And I think a lot of times there ends up being these like weird categories, like for making these chains of compositional chains for inferring things based upon the work of I think it's Tobias Fritz with his Markov category. There's all these, there's an endless zoo of applied category theory that seems relevant to all the things we're talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, as you're saying, like this is why, back to the book. This is why it's so interesting. Is that it seems like it's like when you're actually encountering when I think KL divergence and the active like this bias thing you're talking about, like information dynamics, statistical mechanics and stuff. It's like we're all just trying to do that minimization of divergence a little bit. There's a little bit of that happening, and then this is like there's a place that's not gotten to or not unknown. It has to be navigated to. This like provides like a path or a better conception of the path or something. Um, and it's yeah, like when confronted with actual like novelty along the way, and it has me thinking now. I mean, it's like a crazy this back and forth, but it has me thinking about like endosymbiosis and like that development of energy. We're talking back to Bogdanov with biology as a way to organize or to use biology as like the structural framework to understand organizational ideas. And that being one that's just metabolic, like the early like cell archaea just engulfs so that bacteria so that it can use its constitutive parts as photoelectronics to do photosynthesis and become plants and become animals, so it's like all of, I mean, I guess the bias, with the information theory stuff going into like some Santa Fe Institute stuff, it's like it all makes sense, but it feels very convergent in this conversation. It's very
Oh yeah, that actually I wanted to know, because I know that this academic at Carnegie Mellon, Simon DeDeo, works for the Santa Fe Institute, and I think Reza, you're friends with him, right? Or you're
Yes, yes,
oh yeah,
yes, yeah.
and he talks about all this complexity science stuff, lectures about it, and but I'm still trying to find that review he did of Intelligence and Spirit. I don't know where it is, or uh, didn't he write a review of your book, or?
No, 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 no. Also, I'm pretty sure that so I gave a small talk at MIT. I think it was December. Yes. And some people from Santa Fe Institute were there, and then they told me that they don't know who Alexander Bogdanov is. Good Lord. Because Alexander Bogdanov is essentially the one who influenced none other than Ludwig von Bertalanffy. The principal founder of general system theory. And in fact, Norbert, when he wrote his book on cybernetics, He hadn't read Bogdanov, but a couple of Russian mathematicians who influenced him and were in conversation with him were staunch Bogdanovites.
Interesting. Do you have, I was just curious, this is just general Bogdanov interest, but just for anyone also interested, do you recommend any like histories of Bogdanov, like any books that there's been like a good sort of like historical review?
Red Hamlet.
There's a great, more like earlier scholarly collection. I have it, but I will have to find the name of it. But it was like a centenary publication with a number
I
of different
see.
essays from different fields.
Yes, yes. I know. I have seen. I think I have seen majority of the English stuff about Bogdanov, but Red Hamlet is quite great. Precisely because it kind of goes through the entirety of why, for example, someone like Bogdanov needs to have a spat with Lenin at the end of the
Hmm.
day. And particularly on the issues of some fundamentally Marxist issues, including metabolic rift
Yeah.
thesis.
Yeah. Did you find anything in particular on that? That's been my own interest recently.
On what? Metabolic rift?
Yeah, metabolic rift, and I mean I know of Bogdanov's ecology, but in particular how he
Yes,
conceived of
yes. I
it.
mean, Mackenzie work, some of the stuff are good, but they don't go to into that much details. I don't think
Mm,
that people haven't paid attention to what really Bogdanov actually means by metabolism. There is a certain sort of, I don't know, excessive Marxianization of this sort of stuff, which, interesting from historical perspective, but technically, no, not great.
mm.
I have actually a few things written on this.
Yeah, I'd love to read them.
Yeah,
I read
I can
Bogdanov.
send it.
We did
Yeah.
a reading group on philosophy of life, I think, which at the time
Philosophy
was
of
one of,
life. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that was one
Oh
of the
yeah.
only larger books translated back then.
Oh, and Connor also used to work at the National Berkeley, or what was it, the National Lab in Berkeley on exometabolomics. I don't know if he knows. Uh, ha, he would always mention to me on our phone calls about uh, metabolomics and stuff, or I don't know if that's relevant or.
It's sort of different, but no, I do have some papers that might be of interest regarding this metabolic risk stuff for sure. But coming from this like early 50s, early 60s MIT people that like predated the field of metabolic flux
Hmm.
by like 70 years, they like were writing undergraduate theses. Like metabolic flux is like last 20 years maybe. And there's this guy who was studying math at MIT who was like 22 and wrote, I'll find it. It's somewhere on my hard drive, but it's like insane. It's like reading Nostradamus or something. When I was working in
Wow.
chemistry, I was just like, I can't like, and then that guy went on to like invent some new forms of like crystallography or something. Like he doesn't care about metabolism at
Yeah.
all now. Like he's just like, whatever, yeah, cool. Yeah.
The good old days.
Yeah, it's like so awesome. But yeah,
Reza, there's a
okay.
book I've read like the first couple chapters, but I haven't had time. Soviet architecture historian, a book called the Architecture of Life, and it was about kind of Soviet ergonomics, and Bogdanov played a huge role in it. But
Prolet
it
cult.
looks,
Prolet cult.
yeah, prolet cult, yeah, but it looks like a great book. I mean, the first couple chapters were amazing.
Oh, did Fabio have anything else to say? I don't want to make sure you have a chance to speak.
Well, no, this has been great listening. Um, I find this fascinating because I'm on the edge of these conversations. Um, my co-authors on other projects, for example, are in complexity theory. So I hear these names, I know some of these concepts, but it's good to refresh that. I'd forgotten about Bogdanov. I think a long time ago I used to know more. So I'm really grateful to see that. But also before I disappear back into chair administrative land, Connor up at the front of the beginning of this talk talked about upcoming work on the arts that I have coming. So if it's okay, can I get one sentence of self-advertising? Is that okay?
Oh
Yeah, so
yeah, definitely.
Please.
yeah, because I'm so excited because whenever you get a project like this over the finish line, you just got to tell people. But the book is called Two Visions of the Art World, coming out from Oxford in October. And it's a book that takes aim at the Bourdieu version of the arts, which is all about status chasing and hierarchy, and talks about how the art world has a communal side as well as a competitive side. So it's based on interviews and ethnography. And if you like French social theory, a lot of Bourdieu and why I think Bourdieu is wrong on this issue. So if anybody would like to talk about it between now and then or whatever, just drop me an email. But seriously, getting back to Eric's work, um, I just really found it fascinating because um, oftentimes in cultural studies, we try to bring formalism in some ways. I think earlier there was a discussion of Levi Strauss, and in some of his books, if you're talking Claude Levi-Strauss, the anthropologist, he does use
Hmm.
formalism. Like there is an appendix to structures of kinship that uses group theory to describe, the symmetries found in kinship diagrams and whatnot. But often these attempts at formalizing culture either don't tell you very much or they're just fall into disuse. But I like Eric's approach in that he just kind of takes a very straightforward approach, saying, when people assemble things as like a power set, or when they relate things as a morphism, once you have that, or when they add meaning, that's like a pre-sheaf. And then each of those mathematical constructions has a bunch of tools associated with it that then get you extra mileage that is not present in other theories of formalization or is not obviously present. So I just wanted to thank Eric, and I want to thank every single person and Connor for moderating this. It's been a really insightful conversation, and I will disappear in a minute. I want to thank everybody for their comments, and I hope we can stay in touch. Thank you.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you so much,
Thanks a lot.
Fabio.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Fabio.
much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Okay, well, maybe it's a good time to wrap it. Maybe if anybody has any questions, please ask away. I guess, yeah, I have to go in like 15 minutes back to work, so. But yeah, man. Anyone?
Oh, I wanted to say that it was Andre Vey, right? Who is, if Fabio is still here. Oh, I don't think he is. But yeah, I think it was Andre Vey who did that kinship analysis with the group theory from Bourbaki. Or
Nice. Well, okay, I guess that's the conclusion. Thanks, everybody. How do you feel about it, Eric? Do you want to keep the discussion going or no?
oh, yeah, if no one else has anything else to say, now's your chance. But uh, if anyone in the audience in Milan or on the
Now's the
Zoom.
chance.
Hey. Well, yeah, thanks everybody for being here. It was really fun talking about Eric's work. Great discussion. Thanks,
Yeah.
Reza, Cheyney, Tim,
Love everyone.
Fabio.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Connor.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Eric.
Yeah.
much, Cheyney,
Yes.
Tim,
Thank you, Reza, Cheyney.
Connor, and also Eric, of course.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.
Okay.
Much love.
All right, much love.
Ciao.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you, Eric. All right.